Welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Let's Talk Arsenal series. And for a refresh, in a way, I'm bringing something back that we did, I think, last year. We did this thing called The Big Question, in which I basically put a question out there, get you guys talking, get you guys chatting, get you guys thinking and feeling about the club, about things that are happening this summer. We discuss it with you guys a lot in the chat box. It's a very interactive show, and we want you guys to be as involved as possible. And if you haven't caught this live, do not fear. Please do leave your thoughts and feelings in the comment section as well if you are watching on playback. But please do try to join us for these live shows. I know this has been quite a spontaneous one, but you can find out as to when we go live by checking our Twitter feed at the Gooner Talk TV, and of course by turning that notification bell on as well, so you never miss a show. Good afternoon, chatbots. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are today. Good to have so many of you guys in here. Hello. I want to talk a lot about Aouar, and I want to talk a little bit about Locatelli, because these two players are very interesting targets of Arsenal's. Now, you may have seen some news drop ever so recently. You may have seen that Sassuolo's president has once again come out and spoken about the Locatelli situation. Really strange one, to be honest, because we heard from him before, and he obviously turned around and said that Arsenal are one of the clubs. He's now spoken out again and said, we're in talks for Locatelli with one club from abroad, and it's really advanced. We're going to meet with Juventus in the next days, but there are no negotiations yet with Juve, as the Italian clubs are in difficult financial situations. And this is a really odd situation, because we know that they will try and drive the price up. We know with Locatelli that they will try and do anything they can to get Juventus to pay the money that they want. We know that's what they're going to do. It's a fact that that's what they're trying to do. And Arsenal, from the looks of things, don't have a hope in hell of going for Locatelli, because his priority is Juventus. Aouar is a very weirdly similar situation as what we had in 2020. If you remember the end of the 2020 window last year, the links with Aouar cooled down because supposedly he wanted a Champions League club. He was interested, ironically, Juventus. He was interested in other clubs like Real Madrid. You may remember the links at the end of the last summer window. And it made me think and made me question, is it the right decision for Arsenal to press for these kind of players? Is it the right choice for Arsenal to push for those types of signings? Because I don't know whether or not it is. And I don't know whether or not it's the right type of player, the mentality-wise. Should we be going for players that ultimately don't want to necessarily come to Arsenal as their priority and are pushing to go to somewhere else? Should Arsenal cut their losses on the Locatelli situation and say, even if, say, Juventus can't afford him, or say they're going to have to wait a whole season, should we still stop because Arsenal were not their first choice? Same with Aouar. If he doesn't want to come to Arsenal, should we press? Should we continue on that situation to try and get a deal done? I want to know your thoughts in the chat box about this topic, because it's an interesting one. And then we'll see what you guys think. Let's go on to Twitter, because there was a couple of replies to the actual tweets that I put out, saying that the show was indeed live. We've had a tweet from Football Staying Home, who says, no, he is likely to seek a move at the first opportunity. Besides, we are building a core group of players that want to play for Arsenal, including our jewels from the Hale End crown like Saka and Emile Smith-Rowe. Pierre says, what other players other than the names we've been linked with would fit with Partey in that midfield too, in front of the defence? Which is kind of the situation with Locatelli. Like, we would say that Locatelli has been one of those players, but should we push for someone like Locatelli, considering the fact that he's wanted to move somewhere else? I don't think this is a publicity stunt by Sassuolo, says Temi. I want to know what you guys think. Pedro says, we won't buy many people's first choice because we are not in the Champions League. But should we be buying players that we're not their first choice? Should we be looking for players that are desperate? Like, you look at Lokonga, for instance. Everything that we hear about the Lokonga situation is that he is desperate to move to Arsenal, that he's turned down moves from other clubs because he's not interested in moving to the likes of Atalanta. Arsenal are his priority. He wants to go to Arsenal, and therefore it's a good move for us and him because it works out for both parties. But for Aouar, for Locatelli, there's not that same kind of ambition to join Arsenal. So that's what we're kind of getting at. Vinny says he sounds like a player that would cause disharmony in the squad. I'd rather shop around and try to find the next best thing. I'm also not interested in Sabitzer due to his age and unproven at the top level. Should we then move for players that are going to fit nicer in the team, that have got that commitment and drive to play for the Arsenal week in, week out? I mean, it seems like an obvious answer. You would say, of course, yes, we should move for those players that are going to obviously fight and want to join the Arsenal because it makes sense. However, with the situation that Arsenal finds themselves in, those top players, those transformative figures, the players that are going to make most of a difference for Arsenal, maybe their priority isn't going to be us. Maybe their priority is going to move to someone else, and we've got to try and convince them, be it through negotiation or high wages, to make them come. And in which case, if they're joining a club that aren't their first choice, are they going to have that same commitment and fight and talent on display when they play? Psychologically, is that going to have an impact on them? Mark says, I only want players who feel privileged to play for Arsenal, regardless of our European qualification status. Isoba says, find a diamond in the rough that didn't expect to be scouted by Arsenal. Drew says, I personally don't think we should go for such profiles. That said, as professionals, I wouldn't expect their hearts being set on a different club would affect their performances. And you would hope that is the case, that if a club signs a player that they didn't necessarily want as their first choice, doesn't matter. They're at that club now and they want to fight for that club, because ultimately footballers have a will to win. They want to do as well as they can. They want to ultimately earn those bonuses at the same time that are in their contracts. You would hopefully think that they would still be fighting 110%, whether they're Arsenal or whether they are at Juventus in the case of Locatelli. Wilson said, I've got a sneaky feeling that Arsenal will go and get Basuma. Locatelli is clearly set on a move to Juventus. Temi says, going for your priority targets is acting like a big club. This is exactly what Arsenal is doing. It's also a good point to point out, is this saying that should a club like Arsenal still just push and try and convince players to move elsewhere? Jorginho, for instance, is an interesting one, because Man City really pushed for Jorginho, and he ended up going to Chelsea to be comfortable and around Maurizio Sarri. So it's very difficult, because some players will move. And I would say that at the time, going to Man City was a much better choice at that time than going to, say, Chelsea for Jorginho. It's worked out very well for him now. He's now a Champions League winner, of course, not a Premier League winner. Although is he a Premier League winner? I don't think he is, because he came in after Antonio Conte. So I'm pretty sure it's just Champions League and Europa League as well. So I'm not sure is the answer to the question. In the answer to kind of a player like Jorginho's profile, he went for more comfortability around a coach that he knows, rather than going to Man City, where he would have arguably maybe have been more successful. We just don't know. Chris said, players get good, then bugger off to Man United, Barca, Real Madrid or City because we have no ambition. And I mean, can you blame those players as well? Wayne Sage, thank you ever so much for the donation, mate. He says, it's a ridiculous argument. Were most players desperate to join Man City prior to 2012? It's a very good point. However, Man City have since grown their profile. Man City have since got to a point. I mean, if you think about it, these players are what? 20, 21, 22, 23. 9 years ago, when City began this journey on trying to win the league, in which they did win the league, these guys were still young kids. And young kids are impressionable. And this is a really important point, because I don't know about you, but where I live, and I live down south in England, as you can probably tell from my accent, there are kids around the area that wear Man City shirts. And when I was a kid, no one supported Man City. Absolutely no one supported Man City whatsoever. No one supported Spurs either. I mean, you hate to say it, but they've obviously improved. There was no Spurs shirts around. It was Arsenal, it was Man United, it was Liverpool. And then as I got a little bit older, you started to see a few more Chelsea fans as well. Because, like it or not, glory hunting is a thing. Kids will support the clubs or the teams that are playing well and winning because they want to get one over their mates, and they want to see their teams win as much as possible. It takes a very brave young person to go out and support a team that isn't necessarily that aren't going to win you too many trophies, or as your local team. It takes a lot to do that. And the thing is now is that Arsenal are in a situation where they are at risk from losing generations of young players wanting to move to Arsenal because the perception of Arsenal is changing. The perception of Arsenal now amongst kids growing up is that they are not a top 4 team, not a historical giant, that they are bottle jobs at times, really are. And we have bottled getting into the top 4 so many times, or getting into where we need to be, or bottling big games like the games against Villarreal. And that's important because it does have an impact on the young players, not just in the UK, but across the world. And that perception. Manchester City will become a club that young players will grow up and want to play for. The same way that those young players grew up in the 80s and 90s and before wanting to play for Arsenal because we were, and still are, but back then, we have to admit, a bigger club, you would say, in regards to kind of competitive value than we are right now. And it's really important. We've heard from the likes of Lokonga recently, and we've heard that he likes the idea of going to Arsenal because he was an Arsenal fan and watched the likes of Vieira, etc. We hear about Thierry Henry, and that's only going to carry us so far. It's so important that we change the perception of how we are viewed in not just the Arsenal, in the footballing world, because it's so key that we get back into that stage of competing, because it's going to affect the players that we can sign, and we're seeing it already, and that is it's a big thing, a big thing. Gooner Millsy says, my 9-year-old son started supporting City because he was getting people taking the mickey out of him for supporting Arsenal. People would say, Millsy, that that's silly, that he's a cop-out, etc. But you can completely understand if you're a 9-year-old kid at school and you're getting bullied week in, week out for supporting a team that are not competing or not winning games or losing every time they play a big team, losing to their mates, kids are impressionable and they will change the teams they support. They will choose someone else. And it's something I do genuinely believe is not talked about enough, is the impression that Arsenal have on younger generations right now. We talk about the global fan base. That global fan base will diminish. It will diminish because, again, I know so many fans from abroad that chose to support Arsenal because they love the football that we played. They love the players that played for the club. And that's their connection, because it's different. You're not born in the UK, you're not born near London, you're not born in that sense. And so your association to club will either come through friends of yours that are in the same way or family members. But one of the big ways that our global fan base connect to the club is because they enjoy the football. They enjoy what they see. They flick on the TV for their first ever game of football and they see this amazing style of play. And a lot of foreign fans that I know support Arsenal because of what they saw of the club and their experience with watching the club when they were younger. And you cannot say that Arsenal are anywhere near as attractive to want to choose to be your team now as they were 20 years ago. It's just pure fact. So there you go. Adnan says, I supported because of Vengerball and Ozil and Giroud. Wow, I mean, that's commitment. It was because of Giroud. I've never heard that before, but fair play. King says, Tom, do you think we will compete for the biggest honours with these owners? Other teams' basics are so much higher than the Arsenal. I'm worried that I won't see us lift the Premier League title. King, I'm worried that we won't lift the Premier League title again. It's a genuine worry. I don't think we will under the current ownership because they are not willing to invest in the same way that Chelsea's owners and Man City's owners are willing to invest. It's just the way of the world, just how it works. I will shout to myself if Arsenal sign Aouar. Why will you shout at yourself, Kevin? That's weird. Why would you you're going to shout at yourself? Not Aouar. Please, no. Thomas Rees says, you don't have the same level of loyalty in a lot of cases. What's that? I feel like that's a follow-on comment. Tell me what you mean, Thomas. I don't know what you're talking about. Abhishek says, it's funny how, as fans, we've had so much to say about the Saliba situation, but no one's mentioned how professional Mavropanos has been. I'd rather go keep him over Saliba, who has nothing good to say. I mean, that's very harsh. Very harsh on Saliba. Thomas Rees says, do you think Villa and Everton are on a projection to surpass Arsenal over the next 10 years? Right now, I don't think there's enough evidence to suggest that. No, I don't think either club have done enough to show that they're on a projection to do that right now. However, give it a couple of years. If things continue in the same way and they continue to invest and they continue to bring in quality players and they finish above Arsenal, then maybe we can start to say that. But right now, no, I don't think so. Usopp says, I'm American and I started supporting the Arsenal in 2000 because of the way that we played, and we were very good. Arsenal so desperately need to change this mindset because players like Locatelli, players like Aouar are not looking at Arsenal in the same way that they would have done had they been a player all those years prior. It's something that needs to change. Omar says, I started supporting Arsenal in 2013-14 when I got into football. Been a lot of downs, but a few ups as well. Fair play, mate. Thomas Rees says, I meant foreign fans. Maybe they're the only Arsenal fan they know and are probably getting sick of all of the stick that they're getting. I mean, if someone from abroad chose to change teams because they are sick of Arsenal, obviously that comes with a lot of criticism because obviously the way that we in the UK support is because it's a location thing, it's a family thing, although that isn't always the case, of course. But whereas if you are from abroad, usually it's a case of, unless it's from a friend or a family member, it's because of, as we've already talked about, liking what you're seeing, getting off your seat, watching a team. And that's how you've made that connection and the way that you first started watching football. And so maybe younger fans or the global fan base may be more open to changing the team they support to fall in line with what's the current trend, the current success, the current best teams that are out there. You would hope not, but you can't rule it out. Alistair says, Wenger ball is unsustainable. We don't have those types of players. The top 5 finish is key to put us back in that discussion. Top 5 is an interesting one because you would say that top 4 has to be the target. And if we finish 5th, is that a success or a failure? And I think after a season out of Europe, we need to be targeting that top 4, but it depends on what we do in the market. Tony says, Tom, do you think Holding will have new hair for the start of the season? It does look like it. I think he's already had his procedure. YJ says, I started supporting Arsenal in 2012. The first few years were good, but the rest were disastrous. Demsek says, you can change friends, partners, but you don't change your club. If only it was that simple, Demsek, because it does happen. Jashar says, I started supporting Arsenal because of Ian Wright. Certain players playing for clubs, and I guarantee you that there will be people out there that support City because of Aguero, support City because of De Bruyne, support Chelsea because, I mean, you'll get fans from across the world that will support Chelsea in Germany because of Havertz and Werner, and they're grown-ups. They like those players, seeing them play for the national team. You'll see Spurs fans get a lot of support from South Korean supporters because of Heung-min Son. It is what happens. Like you see your players from, if you're from another country and you see a player from your country move to a certain club, you might start supporting that club because of them. You look at France. There's a lot of people in France I know that are French. Surprisingly, they're from France that like Arsenal because of the link between Arsenal and France. It's just the way that it goes, and so the way that Arsenal have now fallen, it means that there's a change in the perception of how Arsenal are viewed, and it's something that we do need to certainly change. Kanav says, Tom, do you think we can still get Maddison, Basuma, etc.? I want Takahiro because the feeling of stealing a player from Spurs is the best. Lastly, what's your lineup for the police? I mean, there's so many questions there. I'll answer your first one, Kanav. I think that there's always the hope that you can go and sign someone like Basuma. I'm not sure Maddison's realistic because of the price tag and how much we're actually looking to spend this summer. YJ says, I started supporting Arsenal because of the football they were playing in 11-12, the tiki-taka-esque style football that was only second to Barcelona, really, when you think about it, just at not the same kind of level. Sai says, I'm from India and I started supporting Arsenal when we signed Ozil. When it comes from Ozil, most of the Indians enjoyed his game when he was at his prime. He was beautiful to watch. Some of 20-year-old friends mock me much less. It's, again, sometimes people associate to a player and then go through a club in that kind of secondary way. So if Arsenal can't sign players of top quality, that's going to be another route in which they miss out. You'd hope that players like Saka, players like Martinelli, if you imagine Martinelli grows into one of the best Brazilian players, then there would be a lot of Brazilian supporters from that side of things wanting to support Arsenal, growing up and watching Martinelli as an exciting talent in the Premier League, and you'd hope maybe it would go through that route. It's interesting. I wonder how many Portuguese fans out there have suddenly taken a liking to Wolves. I wonder if that's the case. I don't know. I don't know if that now Wolves have kind of a Portuguese supporting contingent because of their association with buying so many Portuguese players. It's completely feasible that would happen. Seal says, I won't be wrong to say most of the foreign fans started supporting Arsenal due to Fabregas and Wenger's ideology. Again, highlighting the fact that there was a player and a style of play that people associated with. Wayne says, Tom, my point was it doesn't matter if the players want to join Arsenal or another club. If you want the best players, you buy them and you improve, which is a very strong point. And it's an argument to say that whether or not a player like Locatelli wants to move to Juventus, we should still go and try and buy him because he's a top quality player that will add a lot to our team. Isawa says the England PR machine for Bukayo Saka might redirect some fans back to Arsenal. Maybe so, because Bukayo Saka is becoming kind of the star boy of English football right now, which is great. TGT Let's Talk says, Tom, how on earth do you know they prefer other clubs? All you do is Google information like the rest of us. You have no source. I mean, we've heard from plenty of sources online that Locatelli prefers the move to Juventus. That seems to be the way. Of course, Googling information is a fantastic way of getting info. It's also a way of being part of the business and having friends that know certain things. That obviously does help, but we don't need that for the Locatelli situation because it's very well reported that he does, in fact, want to move to Juventus. But thank you for your comments. Thomas Rees says, is it coming home, Tom? Of course, mate. Of course. Demsek says, Wenger took Arsenal to Asia and massively expanded the fan base. I mean, obviously, he came from a club in Japan, and so therefore maybe that brought with it that kind of that element as well. But we did a lot of pre-season touring in Asia, a hell of a lot in Asia. So that maybe has contributed. We've done a lot in America, especially recently, and that's grown. Obviously, the Arsenal America side of things has grown exponentially recently as well. And even when Arsenal have been not in their necessarily best state, it has grown a hell of a lot as well. Sai says, we love Arsenal, but it's our greatest insecurity. Sign players, FFS. Adnan says, we have the best chance for a Premier League title because no Europe and we can only focus on the Premier League. If only that were true. Unfortunately, not only do you need not to be in Europe, seemingly, but you need an amazing squad, and we need to improve ours a hell of a lot before we start thinking about Premier League titles and arguably coaches as well. Mr. Thugi says, but preferring a move doesn't mean that he wouldn't want to play for us. I would prefer a Ferrari, but I won't be sad with a Porsche. Depends what it looks like. They're not the prettiest cars in the world. Amandeep says, question, we all love Arsenal, but why does Kroenke hate the club so much? I don't know if it's about hate. I don't think they hate the club. I just think it's a case of they don't have any emotion towards the club. I think it's kind of the complete middle mark where it's not hate, it's not love. They just there's a lack of care. There's a lack of the priority being finances, not success. And I don't mean financial success. I mean on the pitch success. I think that's probably what it is. David Key says, Tom, how much would you accept for Emile Smith Rowe? I would consider 75 million. Is Grealish deal out of the question? Grealish is out of the question completely, mate. There's no point getting your hopes up on that one whatsoever. So there you go. Social says, I don't have a price for Smith Rowe, sorry. Social says, I come from the days of Arsenal's issues used to be, we always tried to walk the ball into the net to score with our fantastic passing. Imagine taking that for granted now. But our biggest problem was that we passed too much to try and score. Thomas Rees says, another reason we have a lot of foreign fans, probably because we were one of the first, if not the first, to really incorporate a lot of foreign players. And that's very true. We were one of the, I think Arsenal were the first team to play an entire 11 of no English players under Arsene Wenger. I think that happened at one point. So, yeah, you can completely understand why the Arsenal grew their global brand in that way. You're now seeing it with Manchester City, with the City Football Group, that they are expanded by not only having a hugely diverse team, but having a diverse collection of teams, a team in Uruguay, a team in Japan, a team in France, in Italy, in Belgium. There are teams all over the place that City have incorporated into that City Football Group in Brazil. So that in itself spreads that brand, spreads that awareness and that pull for fans to want to support Manchester City across the world. Yes, I have seen the press conference for Roma for Mourinho. I've written an article on it. It's hilarious. You got to love the man for his quirks. That's what you got to love him for. Nicholas says maybe Ben White will play in midfield. Haha, God knows what Arteta has in store for us next season. If he says, what do you think will happen to Ainsley Maitland-Niles? I saw a pic of him in training. I mean, I saw Kolasinac in training. So I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen with him in the future, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to train. But there's lots to talk about. Anyway, we're going to wrap things up there. I just wanted to jump on and do a quick show talking about that big question, and then we did a few more questions after that. Please drop a like on the video, guys, if you've enjoyed it. I'm going to try and jump on a few more times. If you've got some kind of big questions that you think need to be discussed, then do leave them in the comments section below, and maybe we'll get around to asking it on a quiet day of Arsenal, which it does seem to be a little bit of today. Of course, it is the fallout to yesterday's game. Amazing victory by England. Absolutely fantastic. I know a lot of you didn't want England to win, which I understand. I get it. It's fine. I've enjoyed seeing some of the saltiness online. Yeah, fingers crossed we can pull it off on Sunday and bring it home. So there we go. Anyway, I'll speak to you guys tomorrow morning for the 8 a.m. show, unless of course anything huge happens this evening. I'm off out now to go and watch some cinema. I won't tell you which film, just in case you spoil it for me, but I'm looking forward to it, and I'll see you guys tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock otherwise. It's been a pleasure, and as always, up the Arsenal.